Last year, my husband Tony and I decided to fly to Thailand for our honeymoon. Neither of us had been there before, but we heard good things about the country. Plus, everyone says how tourist-friendly the country is, so it seemed like a great choice for us. We stayed for our first couple days in Bangkok, and honestly had the time of our life. There were crowds everywhere we went, but neither of us felt unsafe. On our second night, we met a whole group of expats at the karaoke bar near our Airbnb. They gave us tons of suggestions for where to travel. The one place that they all seemed to agree on was Ayutthaya. It's this ancient city about an hour outside of Bangkok. People go there for a day trip and ride bicycles around the crumbling ruins. Both Tony and I were sold on the idea, until one of the expats, a Canadian named Mark, grabbed my arm, hard. All at once, his expression turned very serious. "Make sure you just go for a day trip," he said. "Do not stay overnight." I looked him right in the eyes and said, "Okay." About 20 minutes later, Tony and I got back to our place. We were both pretty drunk, so we crashed immediately. The next morning, Tony woke me up at 8. He always had the supernatural ability to never have a hangover. I don't know how he did it, but he shook me awake and said that the taxi was coming to pick us up in a half hour. He'd already ordered our ride to Ayutthaya. He said that he just booked a night at the cheapest hotel there. I tried to tell him what that Canadian lad had said, but he assured me that everything would be okay. I trusted Tony, so I didn't argue. I knew he'd watch out for me. Pretty soon we arrived at Ayutthaya and checked into the hotel. It was in the back of an alley, and the whole building looked more like a warehouse than a hotel. The doors were metal and they had padlocks instead of regular ones. I had a bad feeling about the place, but when we met the owner, Ati, my fears went away. He was a friendly, smiling man who assured me that we'd have a great time at his hotel. We dropped off our stuff and then started exploring the city. We wouldn't rent bikes until the next morning, so we just walked around and ate some of the street food. By then, my hangover had gone away completely. By the evening, we went back to the hotel, and an older woman greeted us on the side of the road. "Hi, you two," she said. "I'm Ati's sister. Would you like to have dinner at our family restaurant? Guests always get a special deal." Tony said yes immediately. We were both pretty hungry. We followed Ati across the street to another building. Like our hotel, it looked more like a warehouse than anything else. She led us to the top floor, where the restaurant was. As we entered, I turned to Tony and asked if we'd made the right choice. He assured me that it was fine, and I didn't argue. The woman led us to a long table in the middle of a room. The food was already out, all sorts of local dishes. Honestly, it looked amazing. Tony and I sat across from each other. "How much is this gonna cost?" Tony asked. She said that the food was free. We'd just have to pay for drinks. I wasn't in the mood for alcohol, but if that was how she made her money, I felt obligated to order something. We both got beers to start. The woman stood next to the table and watched us blankly as we ate and drank. Tony tried to ask her questions, seeing if she had any recommendations for tourists like us. She just smiled and said, "Just enjoy your meal, my friend." We were on our second beers when I noticed that Tony was starting to sink into his chair. He had his elbows on the table, something he never did, and he was struggling to keep his eyes open. When I saw him, I realized the same thing was happening to me. We were both getting really woozy. That's when I realized that the woman had put something in our drinks. I tried to stand up, but I was too weak. I reached across the table to touch Tony's hand. He looked up at me. We both knew what was going on. We had to get out of there. The woman shouted something in Thai, and two other women came out of the other room. They pushed in another rolling table, but this one didn't have food. It was covered in scalpels, gauze, and all sorts of medical supplies. The woman gave the others directions in Thai, and they giggled. One of them held up a scalpel to check its sharpness. I was still holding Tony's hand across the table, so I squeezed it as hard as I could. I was woozy and exhausted, and if I waited there another minute, I'd pass out. If Tony hadn't been there, I probably would have. All I wanted to do was fall asleep, but because we were together, we could give each other motivation. Using all the strength I had, I stood up and stumbled around the table. I helped Tony to his feet. My mind was still a bit active, and I took out my phone and FaceTimed my friend in the US with those evil women in focus. The network was patchy and the connection never happened, but it was still enough to deter their advances. We leaned on each other and stumbled towards the door. "Wait!" the woman screamed at us. "You didn't pay!" I reached into my pocket and pulled out all the loose cash. It was probably $100, but I didn't care. I just needed to get us to safety. I threw the cash at her and then pushed open the front door. Honestly, I don't remember much about what happened next, but I guess we were both able to stumble down the stairs across the street and into our room. Opening the padlock was the hardest part, but I guess Tony managed to do that. We locked ourselves inside with that same lock and instantly passed out. We didn't wake up until 4 p.m. the next day. We had pounding headaches, but other than that, the drugs had worn off. We decided to just get out of there without renting bikes or doing any of the stuff that we wanted to do. We paid Ati and told him about what happened to us. He shook his head in disgust. "I don't have a sister," he said. "Do you want me to call the police?" We gave him all the information we could about that terrible woman, and then got a taxi back to Bangkok. We didn't wait to find out what happened. After that, our trip wasn't as much fun as before. We were on edge wherever we went. At the end of the week, we were both relieved to be back in America. I'm not sure what those women wanted to do to us. I'd rather not know, but the next time Tony and I go on a trip, we'll be more careful. And if someone tells us not to spend the night somewhere, we'll listen.
My name is Brandon Wilson, and I'm 42 years old. I work as a private security guard. In a recent past, I was hired by the administration of a gym to keep an eye on things during the night. I was supposed to stay inside and pretty much make sure that nothing or no one strange entered or did anything, or serious shit happened. The gym was only open during the daytime. The thing is, the town where this particular gym was located was experiencing a series of violent crimes. People were being killed, that too, in a quite gruesome manner. Sometimes in the streets, and other times inside their homes when they were alone. So the gym owners decided to hire me in order to keep everything safe. They didn't want any unwanted incident that would hurt their reputation. The gym owners were boomers in the purest sense. They didn't believe in CCTVs or other late safety tech. They wanted real men, men of steel and flesh and blood. So, until that criminal spread was over, I was in for some extra money as the gym's security guard. But I wasn't doing it alone. 2 other men, a couple of friends cum colleagues from the same private security company where I work, were going to be there with me as part of a team. Tim, 33 years old, and Janice, yes, a woman, she was 28. 1 week passed, and we had nothing to report. Everything was calm. It was a Monday night, well, already 3 a.m., and me and my friends were, precisely, at the gym. After once again checking out every single division of that place, we simply sat down to wait for our shift to come to an end. While playing cards, of course. "This is what I call easy money," I said. "What do you mean? You're losing the card game," Tim answered. "I mean the job at the gym. Easy peasy. Why would a criminal enter an empty gym at night? The owners are crazy," I replied. "Yep, let's hope it stays that way. But those crimes, they're really violent. I have a friend at the police department. He said that some details are being kept top secret. Like, it seems that some parts of the dead bodies, like bones and skulls, are being taken by the criminal, or criminals, as if they were trophies. That's insane," Janice said. "There's a lot of sick people out there. I've been in this line of work for a decade. At this point, I don't think anything can surprise me anymore, I said. I know, right? Well, I gotta go to the ladies' room. $10 again next game? You're on, Janice. Go on, do your thing, Tim said as Janice went to the bathroom. 20 minutes passed, but Janice was still in the bathroom. Sometimes we need our time to be longer, if you know what I mean. But still, Tim decided to go check on her. A few moments later, Tim was shouting, Brandon! Brandon! Come here quick! Holy sh... I ran as fast as I could, and I saw Janice's dead body. Not inside, in the bathroom, but right outside. It was hanging from the ceiling. Her neck had been slit, and the blood was dripping from that wound, falling on the floor slowly. It resembled some kind of sick ritual. Who the hell did this? Takes the time to do such a thing, and how was this done? I said, trying to figure out what was holding Janice's body. It was some kind of weird substance, like glue, but it burned my skin. I couldn't touch it for too long or else I'd get injured. This is weird. Hey, Tim, check this out. Tim? I called my friend only to realize that he wasn't there anymore. He was always very spontaneous, for good and bad, and seeing Janice dead, especially like that, made him angry. I assumed he went to try to find the murderer on his own. That was a terrible idea. I was moving slowly and carefully, being the pragmatic person of the group and more experienced than most of them. At that point, I wasn't even calling my friend because I knew my voice could attract unwanted attention. Some seconds passed, but I couldn't hear Tim. Or anything, for that matter. Eventually, I heard something. It came from a room down the hall. It was a small room where the gym staff kept some machines and devices that had been replaced and weren't useful anymore. Slowly, I approached the room. The door was closed. I could listen to a constant noise, like someone was hitting a nail with a hammer. Immediately, I opened the door. What are you? I said, when I saw someone whose shape was the same as any average man, but whose features I could barely distinguish, especially using my flashlight only. It was like a pure and black shadow, but completely materialized. Nevertheless, even more intense than that entity's appearance was the sense of pure and cold evil that I was capturing from it. I felt like a little boy, completely hopeless and terrified. And that shadow man was tearing my friend Tim to pieces. The dark figure appeared to be using his own shapeless hands, who apparently were as sharp as blades. I started to shoot the creature, unloading every bullet that I had on it. The entity did seem to be wounded, or at least hurt by those shots. 9mm caliber is no funhouse, especially at such short distance. The Shadow Man sent a shivering scream, both of pain and anger. I had no more bullets, but I got to hit him a couple times on his face. Well, at least where his face was supposed to be, if he had one, within all that hellish blackness. He dropped my friend, and when I thought the entity itself was going to fall, something else happened. The creature mumbled a few words, and some kind of black vortex appeared right in front of it. Then, the Shadow Man simply went through it, and he was gone. The vortex was closed and disappeared immediately, right after the entity passed. I think there's no other explanation than this one. We were dealing with an entity who dwells in a dark, parallel dimension. Since the dawn of time, these shadow people have been identified by several cultures throughout the world and have been given different names. They're described and feared as evil parasites. Obviously, these creatures at times are able to come into our universe and do their thing. How? And how often does this happen? And do they have different, more complex, wicked plans? Are there shadow people among us, disguised perhaps? These are questions that I can't answer for now. In any case, I called the authorities and told them the truth about what happened. A couple of weeks later, I was actually contacted by the cops. They were very interested in listening to the complete details of my story, especially about that dark humanoid entity and how it used a vortex. They were very nice and thankful for my cooperation, although they did say the following. We strongly advise you not to share this story with anyone, much less in public. They would consider you a madman. As I walked into the lobby of the only hotel available on the other side of the road, a shiver ran down my spine. The interior of the hotel reminded me of my grandmother's old house with its faded wallpaper, creaky floorboards, and a musty smell that lingered in the air. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, but I had no other option than to stay the night as my car had broken down on the deserted road leading to the town. As I approached the receptionist gave me a welcoming smile, and I couldn't help but notice the wrinkles etched on her face. She handed me a pen and a book to fill out the necessary details, and I couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since anyone had written in it. After filling out the details, she handed me a rusty key and said, "Room 315 on the 3rd floor. Enjoy your stay." Her voice was calm and reassuring, but I could sense a hint of sadness in her eyes. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor as the elevator was out of order. Each step echoed through the empty hallway, making me feel as if I was being watched. As I made my way to my room, I passed several other doors, which seemed to be creaking and moaning with each passing moment. When I finally arrived at my room, I took a deep breath before unlocking the door. As I stepped into the tiny room, I was met with a musty smell that filled my nostrils. It was so overpowering that I had to cover my nose to prevent myself from gagging. The room was dark and I could barely make out my surroundings. I turned on the light switch and took in the small bed, the desk, and the rickety wardrobe. Too tired to inspect, I fell on my bed and tried to sleep. But sleep eluded me because of a low hum or whisper. I tried to locate the source of the sound, but it seemed to be coming from all around me. It felt like the walls were vibrating, and I wondered if it was an earthquake or something worse. Suddenly I heard a faint rustling sound, and I spun around to see if there was someone else in the room with me, but I was alone. I tried to calm myself down, thinking it must be my imagination playing tricks on me. However, as I looked around the room, I noticed that the noise was coming from the wall behind me. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked toward the wall, trying to see if there was anything hidden inside. That's when I noticed a small hole in the wall. As I stared into the room, I felt a sudden gust of wind, even though the windows were closed. The room grew colder, and I shivered, feeling as if I was being watched. I moved away from the wardrobe, distracted by the wind, and searched for its origin. I saw that the door of my room was wide open. My mind raced in a million directions. I was sure that I'd shut the door earlier. I took steps toward the door and looked down the hallway, hoping to see something or someone that could explain what was happening. But the hallway was empty and drowning in silence. I went back into my room, forgetting all about the hole in the wall, and went back to bed. As I lay there, the whispering continued, growing louder and more distinct. I knew that they were coming from the walls. The whispers made me remember what I wanted to forget: the hole. The whispers were joined by a soft tapping, as if someone was trying to communicate with me from beyond the walls. I also wondered if the noise was coming from the people next door. I hoped it was. As the night wore on, the whispers grew more urgent. I contemplated stepping out of the room and reporting to the receptionist that the neighbors in the next room were making too much noise, but I also knew that doing so was pointless. I buried my head in the available duvet and cried for sleep to take me away. I longed to sleep and fall into the oblivion of the voices and whispers around me. I decided to check the hole again. With a trembling hand, I hesitated for a moment before stepping toward the hole. The urge to explore and see what was on the other side overpowered me, and I reached inside, trying to push the hole wider. Unfortunately, my hand couldn't fit, and I was left with no other choice but to bend down and peek through the small opening. To my shock, my eyes met another pair of eyes, which were staring back at me. For a moment, my heart raced with fear as I quickly looked away, hoping to see something else, anything else. But when I turned my gaze back to the hole, I was met with another pair of eyes. I felt as though I had stumbled upon something out of a horror movie. But when I looked around again, I realized that the room was filled with colorful parrots. The sight was surreal, and it made no sense that there were parrots in a room adjacent to mine. I knew I had to report this to the hotel receptionist immediately, so I stepped out of the room and made my way back to the front desk. I narrated my ordeal and what I had seen, hoping to find a solution. However, the receptionist looked at me with a stern expression and denied the possibility of parrots being in the hotel. "We don't breed parrots," she said, her voice dripping with coldness. "But there are parrots in the room next to mine," I retorted. "No, sir, you must be mistaken," she replied, refusing to investigate any further. She explained that it was against the hotel's policy to check occupied rooms, leaving me feeling stranded and helpless. Despite my efforts to convince the receptionist, she remained adamant, leaving me with no choice but to return to my room. I lay in bed, tossing and turning as the parrots whispered and laughed incessantly, preventing me from getting any rest. The sounds were so disturbing that I even tried to scare them away by slamming the wardrobe door, but they continued with their noisy chatter. I couldn't help but wonder if the people in the room next to mine could hear the parrots too, or if they were completely oblivious. The thought of being alone in a hotel room with a group of loud parrots kept me awake all night, and I couldn't wait to check out of the hotel in the morning. When I woke up, it was morning, and I couldn't even tell the time that sleep carried me into oblivion. My head hurt, my knuckles hurt, and all I wanted to do was run. I packed my load and didn't take my bath or anything. I rushed back into my car after checking out and made a resolve to never check into an old hotel ever again.